Hi everyone. We'll continue our reading today, The Heart of Understanding, commentary on Prashnaparamita by Thich Nhat Hanh. Times like this, when we're facing chaos and uncertainty, it's easy to have lots of fear generated because of the uncertainty, the unknown. The ground is shaky, and so on and on. And as a Tibetan, having gone through a lot of collective trauma as well as personal trauma, I consider Tibetans to be very resilient. And one of the main reasons for this attribution, I feel, is the teachings of Dharma, because it keeps us in a perspective or context of interconnection, surrender, community, and how confusion and compassion and wisdom plays role in its manifestation. And so, and Prashnaparamita is one of the most beautiful texts to really bring that to our heart. And when we do meditation and such, we always have a lot of these imageries of the relative and the absolute, and how the relative is like a cloud and the absolute is like a sky, or the relative is like the waves and the absolute is like the ocean, the water itself and stuff. So similarly, it's like the teaching of emptiness kind of brings that really succinctly. And I really believe that if we really understood this text, it could benefit us so much in regulating our nervous system, opening our heart, seeing the interconnection, as well as the liberation and the spaciousness of emptiness as well. The optimism or the hope that we're looking for is inherent in the teaching of impermanence. And so I really feel like so many answers that we're looking for, they're all already in the indigenous wisdom, the wisdom traditions, and basically, when we look how we have been living, this unsustainable way of living has been a kind of a recent development. It wasn't forever like this. And so I think there's a lot of hope that, even though it feels like unprecedented time, we have the tools. We have them in our toolbox. We just have to, come back and look into them and learn to use them, right? So anyways, I'll start the reading, okay? Long live emptiness. So listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Form is the wave, and emptiness is the water. You can understand through that image. The Indians speak in a language that can scare us, but we have to understand their way of expression in order to really understand them. In the West, when we draw a circle, we consider it to be zero, nothingness. But in India, a circle means totality, wholeness. The meaning is the opposite. So form is emptiness, emptiness is form. It's like the wave is water and water is wave. Form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Because these five contain each other, because one exists, everything exists. In the Vietnamese literature, there are two lines of poetry made by a Zen master of the Lai dynasty, 12th century. He said, "If it exists, then one speck of dust exists. If it doesn't exist, then the whole cosmos doesn't." He means the notions of existence and non-existence are just created by our minds. He also said that the entire cosmos can be put on the tip of a hair, and the sun and the moon can be seen in the mustard seed. These are images that shows us that one contains everything, and everything is just one. You know that modern science has perceived the truth that not only matter and energy are one, but matter and space are also one. Not only matter and space are one, but matter, space, and mind are one, because mind is in it. Because form is emptiness, form is possible. In form, we find everything else: feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Emptiness means empty of a separate self. It is full of everything, full of life. The word emptiness should not scare us. It is a wonderful word. To be empty does not mean non-existent. If the sheet of paper is not empty, how could the sun shine, the logger and the forest come into it? How could it be a sheet of paper? The cup, in order to be empty, has to be there. Form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, in order to be empty of a separate self, have to be there. Emptiness is the ground of everything. Thanks to emptiness, everything is possible. That is the declaration made by Nagarjuna, the Buddhist philosopher of the 2nd century. Emptiness is quite an optimistic concept. If I'm not empty, I cannot be here. And if you're not empty, you cannot be there. And if you're not empty, you cannot be there. And because you're there, I can be here. This is the true meaning of emptiness. Form does not have a separate existence. Avalokita wants us to understand this point. If we are not empty, we become a block of matter. We cannot breathe. We cannot think. To be empty means to be alive, to breathe in and to breathe out. We cannot be alive if we are not empty. Emptiness is impermanence. It is change. We should not complain about impermanence, because without impermanence, nothing is possible. A Buddhist who came to see me from Great Britain complained that life was empty and impermanent. He had been a Buddhist for 5 years and had thought about emptiness and impermanence a great deal. He told me that one day his 14-year-old daughter told him, "Daddy, please don't complain about impermanence. Without impermanence, how can I grow up?" And of course, she was right. When you have a grain of corn, you entrust it to the soil. You hope that it will become a tall corn plant. If there is no impermanence, the grain of corn will remain a grain of corn forever, and you will never have an ear of corn to eat. Impermanence is crucial to the life of everything. Instead of complaining about impermanence, we might say, "Long live impermanence." Thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. And that is a very optimistic note. And it is the same with emptiness. Emptiness is important because without emptiness, nothing is possible. So we should also say, "Long live emptiness." Emptiness is the basis of everything. Thanks to emptiness, life itself is possible. All the 5 skandhas follow the same principle. Such a good text, isn't it? And I feel like it's super interesting to really reflect on the concept of emptiness and impermanence, because all our suffering comes from negating this truth that everything changes, that they don't have independent self, like, This phone right in front of me is not made out of small phones inside it. The table in front of me is not made out of small independent tables. All came together to become this big table. It came as a result of the human mind. They shaped it, the log and the nails, and the log came from the wood forest, and the wood, the forest, it had its own conditions, the soil and the sun and the water and all of this and stuff. And so really the table is made out of non-table elements, just like us. Like our identity, saying I, is made out of non-I identities and designations. And in order for us to make life easier, we like to label them. We like to attach a story around that so we can move on and not have to reflect on the fact that the reality doesn't have a story. But it really messes with our mind, and we want some sort of a consistency, a reliability. So we use the default network to kind of carry on with our story, and through the mind, the memories in the mind, imaginations and stuff like that. And if we're looking for a liberation from the bondages of our story, then it becomes evident that we have to pause and sit and observe and notice that it is the mind that's making the story. It's not really the reality that has a story. And it's the mind that also holding us imprisoned in our identity. They will say, like, I was always like this. I was so angry, and this is who I am. Not recognizing that our anger at that moment came as a result of various conditions and causes that led to that effect. And then as we mature and grow, we have different conditions come in. But instead of having a beginner's mind to respond in a novel way, in a spontaneous way every single time, we carry that story because that it makes it easier for us to and live in a habitual condition. It's like the least resistant kind of way to a certain degree, and it's just more convenient for us. But it also comes with a lot of suffering. The convenience doesn't mean happiness, right? And some of the stories that we have held on to are really depressing stories, the anxiety-ridden stories, the panic-invoking stories, a story of deep losses and fear and anger and jealousy and hatred and aggressions and wars and violence and indulgence into extreme pleasures and addictions and that kind of stories too, right? And then we have stories of joy and the rest. But mainly we see the story of suffering play. And the joy is wonderful, and nobody's complaining about that. So that's we haven't discussed about that much. But there is a story of pain and loss and aversions that we have kind of held on to so strongly, and we're trying to make it into permanent. And the moment gives us opportunity to move on. It's not even seeking for forgiveness or anything. There's nothing to forgive, right? This forgiveness part comes as a result of us not seeing how everything came to be, right? And so, if we need to forgive in order for us to move on, and that's a skillful way of releasing ourselves. So there's nothing wrong with that either. But to raise our life force, waiting for forgiveness is such a sad and silly way of living. But if waiting for forgiveness makes you happy, that's I can go with that narrative. But a lot of times we are not happy waiting for forgiveness. We are holding our heart and a gift that we have inside our heart in imprisonment, unless that condition is met. But the truth is, even if that condition is externally met, because we have not met with ourselves, it doesn't satisfy, because we don't know ourselves. So when we dive into the reality of emptiness, and the formation of I, and the concepts and all the perceptions and the rest of the aggregates, it's easy to kind of respond more spontaneously with grace and with humor and with understanding. And then it's easier to take risk and be bold, and also embrace the freshness that arises every moment. And in a time like this right now, there is like a bubble of the coronavirus quarantining us, and that's that of a fact. But we also have a freedom within ourselves that we can tap into, so our mind is not imprisoned by that narrative, right? Even though physically we are keeping a safe distance, so as not to infect people or not get infected ourselves, and protect the vulnerables and stuff. So anyways, it's a long one. Okay, thank you.